Your brain wants to avoid discomfort. It's always looking for a distraction, an easier way, a life with less friction. But there was a different way of thinking about this, written down a long time ago. About 2,000 years ago, the Stoic teacher Epictetus said it directly. He said that difficulties are what show us who we are. They're what actually shape our character. That's the heart of a pretty radical idea. The idea that you wouldn't see hardship as a curse, you'd see it as a kind of essential training. So we're going to look at a framework for that. For changing how you deal with the challenges that just come with life, turning that anxiety into something steadier. We'll look at why the Stoics actually sought out discomfort on purpose. How they trained their attention to focus only on what was within their control. And then this other, maybe surprising practice, learning to accept, even to love, whatever happens. They built a stable mind, not by getting out of the storm, but by learning how to stand in it. So think about a common irritation in your own life, something you usually try to get away from. For a Stoic, a difficult situation wasn't something to get rid of. It was a rep in the mental gym. That shift changes the whole story when something goes wrong. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstance. You become an athlete in training. The frustration, the delay, the minor inconvenience, it's not an attack on your peace. It's the material you use to build that peace. That reframing is the foundation. It's the difference between trying to build a muscle without ever lifting anything heavy and understanding that the resistance itself creates the strength. Our modern world that makes me stronger. Notice what changes in that moment, not in the world around you, within your own mind. Your peace of mind might just come down to sorting two things. There's this Stoic idea, the main one really, called the Dichotomy of Control. It's their most useful tool. And that feeling of frustration or anxiety, it's usually a sign you've mixed up the two categories. You're trying to control what you can't, and you're ignoring what you can. Epictetus started his whole handbook with it. He said some things are up to us and some things are not. What's up to us? Our opinions, our impulses, what we want, what we avoid. Basically, whatever is our own doing. What's not up to us, our body, our property, our reputation, any public office. Whatever is not our own doing, that's the foundation. The training is just sorting. It sounds simple, but it takes a real honesty because most of our emotional energy goes into that second list, things that aren't our own doing. We get angry at the weather. We're anxious about what someone else thinks. A traffic jam ruins our day, even though we didn't cause it. The discomfort is that internal conflict, trying to command what you can't. So the training is a redirection. You feel that frustration from a critical comment. The comment itself, their opinion, their choice to say it, that's not up to you. That's the second category. What is up to you? Your judgment about that comment. Is it useful feedback or just noise, your reaction? Whether you respond with defensiveness or with a calm clarity. Your decision on what to do next, that's your arena. That's where you train. Take the traffic jam. All those red brake lights, the delay, your schedule falling apart. None of that is in your control. Your foot isn't on the accelerator of the car ahead, but your internal response, that's your domain. You can choose to fume, to curse, to let it ruin your morning. Or you can take that same situation and use it. You can take a deep breath. You can listen to an audiobook you've been saving. You can practice just watching your own impatience without letting it take over. In that moment, you're not a victim of traffic. You're an athlete practicing focus right in the middle of the chaos. The goal isn't to become passive. It's to become effective by putting all your effort where it actually matters, your judgments and your actions. So here's a practical step. Think of one worry you have right now. Maybe it's work, a relationship, money. Now just mentally make 2 columns. In the first column, list everything about that worry that's truly within your control. Your preparation, your communication, your effort, the very next single action you can take. In the second column, list everything that's not, other people's decisions. Market conditions, things that have already happened, the final outcome, just the act of sorting them that starts the training. It pulls your energy back from that vast, stormy sea of things you can't command. And it anchors that energy on the solid ground of your own choices. That's how you build a stable mind, not by controlling the world, but by mastering your relationship to it. The Stoics would actually schedule hardship for themselves. They'd make an appointment with discomfort. That's the next step in training, not just accepting what happens, but inviting a little difficulty in. It's like a psychological vaccine. A small, controlled dose builds your resistance to the bigger shocks life will send. You prove to yourself in a safe way that you can handle more than you think. This wasn't about punishing yourself, it was about freedom. Freedom from the fear of losing what you have. Seneca wrote about this. He'd practice poverty on purpose. Set aside a few days each month to eat the plainest food, wear his oldest clothes, sleep on a hard bed. He didn't have to do it, he was reminding himself. Proving to himself that his happiness wasn't tied to his comforts. He wrote that he was sending himself ahead into a future that might one day be forced on him. Building a shelter in his own mind that nothing outside could take away. The goal was to break that automatic link between comfort and contentment, to find that your baseline peace, your core self, could stay intact even when conditions weren't ideal. So what does that look like now? It's a digital detox, putting away the stream of entertainment, not because it's bad, but to remember you can be okay with your own thoughts. It's the cold shower in the morning, a brief, sharp encounter with a sensation you'd normally avoid, teaching your nervous system that discomfort is temporary and you're in command. It's choosing the harder task, taking the stairs, cooking a simple meal instead of ordering out, exercising your discipline in a low-stakes way. Each small act is a message to your deeper mind. It says, I'm not fragile, I'm not at the mercy of my surroundings. I can choose a harder path and find I'm still whole on the other side. That reduces the terror of future loss. If you've already practiced living without constant convenience, the idea of a power outage or a financial setback loses some of its power to panic you. You've been there before by choice, you know the territory, so here's a challenge for the week. Choose one small, voluntary discomfort, just one. It could be skipping a meal you usually rely on not to diet, but to feel the sensation of hunger and watch your reaction. It could be leaving your phone in another room for an evening, taking a walk without a podcast, just with your own company. The key is to do it consciously. Not as a punishment, but as an experiment, as training. Notice what happens inside you. Do you feel a restless anxiety, a craving for the easy thing? Or do you find a quiet space, a resilience you didn't know was there? That discovery, that quiet strength, that's the point of the whole exercise. Mental stability at its deepest level isn't about tolerance. It's gratitude for the obstacle itself. That's the final layer of the training. The Stoics called it acceptance, but it's more than that. It's an active, creative embrace. You look at what life hands you, especially the hard parts, and you say, I can handle this. And then you go further. You say, this is good for me, this is necessary. This is what I needed. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. He told himself to accept whatever comes, woven into the pattern of your destiny, because what could fit your needs more aptly? That's a staggering thought. The thing frustrating you right now is woven into a pattern meant to shape you. It's not a random error. It's the material you were meant to work with. Later, this idea was captured in a phrase, Amor Fati, a love of one's fate. It asks you to shift from seeing life as events that happen to you to seeing it as a story you're co-authoring. The setbacks, the delays, the losses, they aren't plot holes. They're the twists that force the character to grow, to change direction, to discover a strength they didn't know they had. This isn't passive resignation, it's the opposite. It's an active search for the hidden lesson, the buried opportunity. It's the difference between being stuck in a rainstorm and miserable, and realizing the rain is watering a seed you planted long ago. A seed you couldn't see until the ground softened. Think of a career setback, a project fails, a promotion is missed. In the moment, it feels like a pure loss. But with this lens, you start to ask creative questions. Did that failure free me from a path that wasn't right? Did it force me to develop a skill I'd been neglecting? Did it introduce me to a person or an idea I would have otherwise missed? Very often, in hindsight, we can trace a line from our biggest disappointments to our most meaningful directions. The pivot only happened because the original plan fell apart, or a personal loss, a deep experience of change. It can carve out a capacity for empathy that simply didn't exist before. It can reorder your priorities. It shows you what truly matters with a clarity that comfort never provides. The hardship becomes the teacher of a lesson no easier experience could have conveyed. So here's a way to train this muscle of grateful hindsight. Can you identify a past difficulty that, looking back, you are now quietly grateful for? It doesn't mean you're glad it happened in a literal sense. It means you can see the person it helped you become. What did that experience teach you that ease could not? What strength did it reveal? What path did it inadvertently open? Carrying that insight forward changes how you meet the next challenge. It builds a quiet trust, a deeper stability. You begin to face difficulties not with dread, but with a kind of focused curiosity. You start to ask, what is this moment trying to train in me? And in that question, you stop fighting your fate. You start working with it. What if imagining the worst-case scenario actually made you less scared of it? The Stoics had a name for that, Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. It sounds dark, but it was their most practical tool for building a calm that couldn't be shaken. This wasn't about dwelling on doom, it was a rehearsal, a deliberate visit to a future your mind already fears, so that when you get there, you've already been. You know the territory, you've already walked through your own calm response. Seneca advised this. He told his friends to set aside days, to be content with the scantiest food, the coarsest clothing. And to ask yourself, is this the condition that I feared? He wasn't promoting pessimism. He was draining future events of their emotional power by imagining the loss of your job or your health or your reputation. You accomplished two things. First, you proved to yourself that you could endure it. That realization cuts the anxiety in half. Second, you snap back to the present. With a sharp, clear gratitude for what you have right now, you don't take it for granted. So here's a brief exercise, a direct application. Think of something you worry about losing. Your current job, for instance. Instead of pushing that fear away, invite it in for a controlled rehearsal. Imagine the scenario in detail. You receive the news. You feel the initial shock, then you watch yourself. You see yourself take a deep breath. You methodically list your resources, your savings, your skills, your network. You calmly plan the first 3 steps, updating your resume, reaching out to a former colleague, considering a temporary position. The point isn't to manifest the event. It's to manifest your own capability, to replace the nebulous terror of the unknown with the concrete, manageable steps of a plan you've already seen yourself execute. This practice trains equanimity by making the mind familiar with adversity before it arrives. It's like a fire drill. You don't conduct a fire drill because you want the building to burn. You do it so that if the alarm ever sounds, your body knows what to do. Panic is replaced by procedure. The Stoic mind conducted these mental fire drills daily. For the loss of a loved one, they would reflect on mortality, not to be morbid, but to cherish the person deeply in the present moment. For a public failure, they would imagine the whispers and the judgment. to fortify their self-worth against the opinions of others. So here's a prompt. Before this day ends, choose one quiet moment. Mentally walk through a future event you sometimes fear. A difficult conversation, a financial pinch, a personal rejection. But as you walk through it, focus entirely on your calm, resourceful response. See yourself navigating it with dignity. See yourself accessing strength you forget you have. Then open your eyes, feel the solid ground of the present beneath you. Notice how the fear, having been examined in the light, often feels smaller. Less like a monster in the shadows, and more like a challenge you are now prepared to meet. There's a space between something happening and how you react. The Stoics worked to make that space wider. They called this the Discipline of Assent. It's about guarding your mind, not with walls, but with a question. Is what I'm telling myself actually true? Epictetus said it directly. People are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. The angry email, the critical comment, the sudden change. The event itself is neutral, it's just information. The disturbance comes right after, when your mind puts a label on it. This is terrible, this is unfair. This ruins everything. That label is the impression, and your automatic agreement is the assent. That's where the emotional chain reaction starts. The training is to stand at that exact point. To catch the impression before it becomes a belief, before it becomes a feeling you have to act on. Think of your mind as a courtroom. An event happens, and a prosecutor immediately stands up. This prosecutor is fast, loud, and certain. He makes his case. This delay is a disaster. That person meant to disrespect you. This mistake proves you're a failure. The discipline of assent is you, as the judge, banging the gavel. Hold on. Let's examine the evidence. Is there another explanation for this delay? Could that tone be from their own bad day and not about you? Does one mistake define your entire capability? You're not denying the event happened. You're challenging the story you're telling about it. You're putting a moment of choice between the thing and your response. Here's a practical example. You get an email from a colleague. The language is terse, maybe sharp. Your initial impression flashes. This is an attack. They're angry with me. I must have done something wrong. The old pattern is to assent right away, to feel that flush of defensiveness or anxiety, to either fire back a reactive email or spend the next hour worrying. The trained response is the pause. You take one breath, and in that space you interrogate the impression. Is this truly an attack, or could it be a rushed message sent between meetings? Is their frustration necessarily about me, or could it be about a pressure they're under that I know nothing about? What is the actual, verifiable fact here? The fact is words on a screen. Everything else is my interpretation. By questioning it, you reclaim your power. You might decide the email does need a clarifying response, but now it can be calm and professional, not defensive. You might realize it has nothing to do with you, and you can let it go. The event didn't change, but your relationship to it transformed completely because you guarded the gate. This is how you build mental stability from the inside out, not by trying to control the endless stream of events, but by mastering your automatic judgments about them. The discomfort you feel is often just the friction of an unchallenged thought rubbing against reality. So here's a small practice. Before this day ends, you'll encounter a minor frustration. A spilled drink, an interrupted plan, a rude driver. When you do, try the one-breath pause. In that single breath, do not react. Just notice the initial story your mind wants to tell. Then silently ask it one question. Is that the only way to see this? That tiny space, that moment of inquiry, is the foundation. It's where you stop being a passenger to your impressions and start being the pilot of your peace. From a distance of 10,000 years, your current challenge looks different. That's the final vantage point, the view from above. When a problem feels all-consuming, it's because your mind is standing too close. You see a chaotic blur of paint. The Stoic practice is to step back, to see the whole mural of time and space, with your struggle as one quiet brushstroke inside it. This isn't about diminishing the experience, it's about context, placing it inside a story so vast your anxiety loses its power to distort. Marcus Aurelius used this constantly. In political strife, in military campaigns, he wrote reminders to himself. He said, "Look at everything that exists and see it is already disintegrating and changing." Or scattering, or think of universal substance like a river carrying all things. He wasn't being bleak, he was performing a mental zoom out, from the urgency of the council room to the slow turning of the planet. From his own lifetime to the endless procession of generations before and after, his worries, seen from that height, didn't vanish, they shrank to their true proportion. They became part of a natural flow, not a personal catastrophe. This counteracts the myopia of stress. Stress makes everything feel immediate, permanent, and personal. The view from above shows you it is temporary, small, and universal. Your struggle connects you to every other person who has ever lived, who has also faced loss and fear under the same stars. Here's a practical way to try it. Think of a worry occupying your mind right now. Now imagine explaining that same worry to yourself 10 years from now. How would that future you, with a decade of life in between, view this concern? Would it seem like a pivotal turning point or a difficult chapter you moved through? Often we inflate the present moment because we can't see the longer story we are inside. Or take the literal view, picture the Earth from space, that fragile blue marble. See your entire country as just a shape, your city as an invisible speck, your own life as a brief flicker within it. From that distance, the argument you had, the project that failed, the slight you received, they don't disappear. But their weight changes. They are absorbed into the immense, quiet beauty of the whole. Your personal drama is real, but it is also a tiny part of a cosmic drama billions of years old. This perspective fosters a deep calm. It turns panic into patience. It replaces the question, "Why is this happening to me?" with a quieter observation. This is happening as part of the great happening of all things. My job is not to rage against the current, but to navigate my small boat with as much grace and courage as I can. So here is a reflective prompt. Take a moment, write down your single biggest concern right now. Just a few words. Now, at the top of that page, write this preface. In the grand scheme of the universe, and read the sentence aloud. In the grand scheme of the universe, I am worried about this meeting, this debt, this conflict. Feel the shift that occurs. The problem is still there. It still needs your attention, but the frantic, suffocating energy around it begins to dissipate. It is placed back into the stream of time where it belongs. You are no longer drowning in the wave. You are watching the ocean from the steady shore of your own awareness. The barrier isn't something you go around. It is the path. That's the shift. Training becomes action when you see it that way. You've built stability. You've sorted what you can control. You've practiced acceptance. Now the last step is this. The obstacle itself is the only way forward. It's not a detour. It's the main road. Marcus Aurelius wrote it plainly. An impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. He wasn't just offering consolation. It was a tactical manual. The very thing that seems to stop you is what will develop the skill, the virtue, the solution you actually need. Smooth sailing never taught anyone to be a skilled sailor. A calm sea doesn't demand resourcefulness. It doesn't ask for resilience or courage. Those qualities only come out when you face the storm, so the obstacle isn't interrupting your journey. It's starting the real one, the journey where you find out what you're made of. Take a historical example, the Roman philosopher Seneca. He was exiled by the emperor. Sent to a remote island, stripped of his wealth, his influence, his entire life in Rome. That was the obstacle, immense, seemingly final, but he didn't just endure those years. He used them. He turned that forced isolation, that blockage, into a period of deep writing and reflection. Some of his most influential works came from that time. The letters and essays that would guide Stoics for centuries. The barrier became the path. His political career was blocked, so the path of philosophical contribution opened wider. Now bring it to a modern moment. Imagine a project at work falls apart, the funding is cut, a key partner walks away. The immediate story is one of failure. A setback, but the Stoic lens asks a different question. What does this blockage make possible that wasn't possible before? Does it force a simpler approach? A more creative one? Does it reveal a flawed assumption that needed correcting? Does it push you to develop a skill you'd been avoiding? Negotiation. Frugal innovation. Often, the most groundbreaking directions are found only because the comfortable road is closed. This is about finding agency when you feel you have none. You can't control the obstacle, but you absolutely control your response to it, and your response can transform the obstacle's nature. A delayed train becomes a chance to finally read that book. A difficult conversation becomes an exercise in clear communication. A financial limitation becomes a masterclass in prioritization. The obstacle provides the raw material. Your virtue is the craft, so here's a prompt. Identify one current obstacle in your life, a relational tension, a work problem, a personal goal that feels stuck. Now, instead of brainstorming how to remove it, brainstorm this. What single virtue could this obstacle be the perfect training ground for? If it's a stubborn person, maybe it's training for patience. If it's a lack of resources, training for ingenuity. If it's a fear of failure, training for courage. Then ask one more question. What is one small action I can take today that uses this obstacle as its fuel? That action, no matter how minor, is you walking the new path, the one it created just for you. Stoic indifference is often misunderstood. It sounds like cold detachment, like a life without passion or care, but that's not what it is. The Stoic idea of indifference, adiaphora, isn't about not caring. It's about caring for the right things. And in the right way, it's a sorting of your emotional investments. Imagine you're holding a beautiful vase. You can appreciate its craftsmanship. You can enjoy having it in your home. But if you believe your happiness is inside that vase, you become its prisoner. The moment it cracks, your peace cracks with it. The Stoics said external things are like that vase. Things like wealth, reputation, even our health. They called these things indifferent to our flourishing, not because they don't matter, but because they are not the source of it. They are the material, not the masterpiece. The masterpiece is your character, your virtue, how you choose to act with whatever material you have. That's the insight that cuts discomfort off at the root. So much of our anxiety isn't about the event itself. It's about the meaning we've attached to something external we might lose. Our discomfort shows we've mistaken a preferred thing for an essential one. Epictetus drew a clear line. He said some things are up to us and some are not. The things not up to us, our body, property, reputation, he called not our own, and then he gave the instruction. Do not claim that which is not your own. When you claim an external as your own good, you hand over the keys to your inner stability. You grant it the power to devastate you. So training indifference is the practice of appreciation without attachment, learning to hold things loosely. You can work hard for success and enjoy its fruits. But you do not tie your self-worth to the outcome. You can cherish your health, but you do not see illness as a personal failure. You can desire a good reputation. But you do not let the gossip of others dictate your inner state. The goal is to use the world, not to be used by it. Consider the difference between enjoying success and being enslaved by the need for it. One person builds a business. They are diligent, creative, engaged in the work. If the business thrives, they are grateful. They use the resources. If the business faces hardship, they are concerned, but their core identity isn't shattered. They adapt. Their worth was in the doing, not just the having. Another person ties their entire sense of value to the business's success. The quarterly numbers are a verdict on their life. A market downturn feels like a death. They are not using the business. The business is using them, draining their peace with every fluctuation. So how do you train this? You prepare for loss before it happens, not with worry, but with a mental rehearsal of sufficiency. Think about a financial loss. Instead of fearing it as an existential threat, you practice the thought experiment. If I lost a certain amount of savings, what would I truly lose? Would I lose my capacity for kindness, my ability to learn, my relationships built on care, not capital? You would likely find your most important tools remain intact. Your mind, your character, your resilience. The loss is real and difficult, but it is not the end of you. By valuing virtue as your true good, the externals become traveling companions, not the destination itself. Here's a reflective prompt. What is one external thing you highly value right now? Your job title, a relationship, your physical fitness. Now ask yourself, how would my inner stability change if I saw this as preferred but not essential? If I appreciated it deeply but did not claim it as the source of my goodness, that small shift in perspective is the training. It doesn't mean you stop striving. It means you start living from a place of unshakable inner resource, no matter what the world brings to your door. Gratitude was a discipline for the Stoics. It was especially powerful when you practiced it right in the middle of discomfort. This wasn't about saying hardship felt good. It was a choice to see what was still there when something got taken away. It shifted your mind from a list of what you'd lost to an inventory of what you still had. That practice of negative visualization we talked about, it leads here. When you mentally remove a comfort, you're not just preparing to lose it, you're retraining your eyes to see its presence right now as the gift it actually is. Seneca wrote about this in his letters. He said we should thank fortune for what she's left us, even in hard times. He said to think not of what we lack, but of what we possess. And to possess something is to have it in abundance. That was his point. Gratitude isn't a passive feeling that shows up when everything's perfect. It's a conscious act of attention. You focus your light on what is here, and in that light, the shadows of what's missing, they get smaller. Think of it like a painter with a limited palette. If you have every color, you might not see the depth you can make with just blue and gold. But if your reds and greens were taken away, you'd have to look. You'd be forced to see the possibilities in those two colors with a new intensity. You'd find shades and contrasts you never noticed. Hardship often takes a color from your palette. The Stoic response is to immediately start mixing with what's left, to find the richness that was always there, waiting. There's a practical way to do this. Next time you face a small, tangible hardship, use it as the trigger. Maybe your house is cold because the heater's slow. Instead of just feeling the discomfort, take that moment. Consciously list 3 other things in that same moment you're grateful for: the solid roof, the warm sweater you're wearing, the fact you have a home at all. Or a simple meal when you wanted something more. Be grateful for the nourishment, for the hands that made it, for the abundance that allows you that meal today. You're not denying the inconvenience, you're putting it inside a larger context, a context of sufficiency. This act doesn't just make you feel better. It strengthens your character. It proves to you that your peace isn't held hostage by perfect conditions. You can find footing even on uneven ground. So a prompt for tonight, a Stoic gratitude list. As you get ready to rest, mentally list 5 things you're grateful for, but include one specific thing you usually take for granted. Something so basic it operates in the background. Clean water from the tap, the reliable electricity for your light, the safety of your street, your own lungs breathing without your command. Name it, acknowledge it for that moment, see it not as a given but as a grace. This simple act trains your perception. It builds a reservoir of appreciation. Hardship can't drain it because you've learned to source it from what remains, not from what is lost. The Stoics had this idea, this North Star for the mind. They called it the sage. It wasn't something they thought they could actually become, but it was a figure to navigate by, an ideal of perfect wisdom and virtue. A person whose mind stayed steady, whose judgments were always clear, whose actions came from deep principle, no matter what was happening around them. Aiming for that wasn't about setting yourself up to fail. It was about giving yourself a compass for any hard choice. The sage is a standard of perfect rationality. So in the middle of your own frustration or your fear, you can ask a simple question. What would the sage do here? Not as a demand for perfection, just as a search for direction. The answer won't be some complex philosophy. It'll be something very simple. The sage would see the situation clearly without taking it as a personal insult. The sage would focus only on what could be controlled. The sage would respond with justice, not vengeance, with courage, not avoidance. That question turns a messy emotional reaction into something cleaner. A more principled path. Philosophers like Seneca would point to real people as models, figures who came close to the ideal. He wrote a lot about Cato the Younger, a Roman senator known for his integrity. During a civil war, when morals were collapsing, Cato chose principle over power. He chose consistency over convenience. Even when it cost him everything, to Seneca, Cato was a near sage, a living example, proof that such stability wasn't a myth. It was a possibility etched into human character. Those stories weren't about worship, they were proof of concept. They showed what a trained mind could look like under pressure. So how does this work now? Take a modern moment. Imagine you're facing unfair criticism at work, a public comment that twists what you did and questions your competence. Your first, raw reaction is a flash of heat. Defensiveness, anger, the impulse to fire back or to shrink into shame. This is where you pause and you ask that navigational question: what would the sage do? The sage would start by separating the event from the story. The event is the criticism, the words that were said. The story is the one you're telling yourself about what it means. The sage would examine the criticism with calm analysis, looking for any useful signal in the noise, any truth to be acknowledged, even if it was delivered poorly. If there is some truth, that becomes a point for growth, not a wound. If there isn't, then it's just noise, the opinion of another person, and that holds no power over the sage's sense of self-worth. Then the sage's response would be measured, maybe a clarifying conversation without accusation, or maybe a conscious decision to let the comment pass. Like a leaf on a river, because it doesn't merit the energy of a fight. You are not the sage, you will feel the heat, but by asking the question, you create a gap. Between the heat and your action, you choose to follow the compass, even if your hand shakes a little on the way. This modeling is about getting better step by step. Not about perfection. You don't measure yourself against the ideal and declare failure. You use the ideal to see your next step. Yesterday, you might have reacted instantly with anger. Today, you felt the anger, but you paused for 5 seconds before speaking. That's progress, that's navigation. The sage is the point on the horizon you sail toward. You know the winds will push you off course, but you always correct back to that bearing. The Stoics had this practice, Memento Mori, remember you must die. And it wasn't meant to be dark, it was a tool, a way to burn away trivial worries. It sounds like the opposite of stability, but for them, it was a clarifying lens. It wasn't about fear, it was about focus. If you keep the finiteness of life in view, you stop wasting your time, your most precious resource. You stop spending it on things that don't deserve it. Petty resentments, vain anxieties, the craving for approval, those are luxuries. They're for someone who believes they have an endless supply of days. But an awareness of an ending changes the calculation. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." He wasn't being morbid, he was installing a filter for his attention. If this hour could be your last, this conversation, this task, how would its quality change? Would you spend it complaining, or would you find a way to be fully present, to act with integrity, to connect? the discomfort of a long queue doesn't vanish. A rude comment doesn't disappear, but their power to dominate your mental state does. They're exposed, they're temporary, insignificant friction against the backdrop of a limited, precious life. Seneca tackled this directly. He said it's not that we have a short time to live, it's that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough if you know how to use it. But we act as if we'll live forever. We postpone what matters, we indulge in grievances, and those grievances steal our present moments. Memento Mori was the antidote to that postponement. It asks if not now, when. This urgency isn't for frantic achievement. It's for deliberate virtue, choosing kindness now, starting the meaningful project now. Mending the relationship now, because later is a story we tell ourselves, and it may never arrive. Consider the practical shift. You have an hour to spend. You could spend it rehashing a minor slight from yesterday, your mind caught in a loop of resentment, or with a gentle reminder that this hour is one of a finite number. You could choose differently. You could use that hour to read something that expands your mind, to take a walk and truly see the sky, to write a message of appreciation. The slight hasn't changed, but your valuation of your own time has. You begin to see that dwelling on the offense is the real cost, far greater than the offense itself. So here's a reflective prompt. If you remembered your time was limited, which of your current discomforts would lose its power? That lingering annoyance from a coworker's remark, the anxiety over a small imperfection, the frustration with a household chore. Seen through the lens of mortality, these concerns often shrink. They shrink to their true size. They are not the main events of your life. They are background noise, and you can choose to turn down the volume, to save your energy, your focus, your very life for what truly builds a legacy of character. This remembrance doesn't bring despair, it brings a quiet motivation, a profound motivation to live right now without the clutter of imagined tomorrows. The Stoics understood that training the mind and the body happens together. That physical discomfort was a place to train the will. It wasn't about building muscle. It was about using the body's signals, the cold, the ache, the tiredness, to train something deeper, your capacity for command. By facing a physical challenge, you run a kind of experiment. You prove to your own mind that you can endure something hard, that your inner world doesn't have to collapse into complaint. Each time you do that, you strengthen that command center. You build evidence that you're more resilient than your first impulse says. The Roman teacher Musonius Rufus talked about this directly. He said hard physical labor wasn't beneath a philosopher. It was essential. He saw value in working with your hands, in living simply, in accepting the fatigue from honest effort. For him, this wasn't a punishment. It was a grounding. It connected ideas to the reality of breath and sweat. It kept philosophy from being just elegant ideas discussed in comfort. The training had to be lived in the body to be real. You see a parallel now in endurance training. A marathon runner isn't just teaching their legs to move, they're teaching their mind to negotiate with pain, to override the voice that says stop, to find a rhythm that carries them past what feels possible. The physical achievement is secondary. It's the mental frontier they cross. The Stoic approach applies that same logic to ordinary life. You don't need a marathon. You need to see your daily life as full of these small tests of will. So what does that look like? It could be choosing to take a walk on a cold, drizzly morning when you'd rather stay inside. The goal isn't the walk, it's the mental posture you adopt. You notice the cold on your face, you feel the initial resistance in your body, and instead of tightening up with resentment, you practice a kind of open acceptance. You observe the sensation without adding a story of misery. You keep your breathing steady. You focus on the rhythm of your steps. In that small act, you're not just walking. You're holding a seminar for your own will. You're showing that comfort is an option, not a requirement. Another practice is delaying a small gratification. Finishing a work session before you get that cup of tea, doing a necessary chore before you let yourself sit down. It's a tiny exercise, prioritizing intention over impulse. Each time you do it, you silently affirm that you're in charge. The body's request is noted, but it doesn't automatically set the agenda. Here's something to try. For the next week, choose one mildly strenuous physical activity: that walk in bad weather, a longer hike, a thorough cleaning of a room, done with full attention instead of rushing. Commit to doing it once, but as you do, pay close attention to your internal dialogue. When the first hint of discomfort comes, what does the inner voice say? Does it whine or bargain or catastrophize? Your task isn't to silence it, it's to hear it clearly and then to gently choose to continue. The victory isn't in the distance covered or the task finished. The victory is in the quality of your attention during the effort. You're collecting data on your own resilience, one conscious breath at a time. The difficult person in your life, imagine they were actually your resilience coach. That's the Stoic take. These people aren't mistakes in your social world. They're provided by nature, specifically for your training. It's a social gym. And the weights are other people's behavior. Your job is to lift them with patience, with understanding, with justice. That reframes conflict. A rude comment, someone's stubbornness, their unreliability. These aren't attacks on your peace. They're the exact conditions your peace was meant to withstand. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this in his private notes. He said, when people injure you, ask what good or harm they thought would come of it. You'll see you don't need to be angry, but he went further. He said to love those who stumble because they give you practice in patience, in tolerance. In forgiveness, they're your teachers. It's the same principle we use for traffic, for cold showers. Their actions are outside your control. They go in that second column. What they say, their tone, the choices they make, that's their problem, their karma, their own internal weather. Your response, though, that's your domain. Your training ground, your arena for virtue. So what does the training look like in a heated moment? Let's outline a strategy. You're in a conversation. It's turning difficult. The other person is raising their voice or being dismissive or repeating a criticism you've heard 1,000 times. First, you deploy the pause. The discipline of assent. In that space between their words and your reaction, you catch the initial impression. This person is trying to hurt me. This is unfair. I need to win this. You question it. Is that the only story? Could they be speaking from fear, from insecurity, from a bad day I know nothing about? Second, you consciously recognize their actions as their problem. Their anger, their frustration, their rudeness, that's their inner state manifesting. It's data about them, not a verdict on you. You don't have to accept the delivery, but you can refuse to take ownership of their emotional baggage. Third, you choose a virtuous response from the options you control. This is where the training becomes active. Justice might mean hearing their core concern, even if it's poorly packaged. Courage might mean calmly stating a boundary. I hear you're upset, but I won't continue if we raise our voices. Patience might mean letting the wave of their emotion crash against your calm without needing to send a wave back. This isn't about being a doormat. It's about being a fortress with an open gate for reason, but walls high enough that chaos can't storm in. Setting a boundary with calm clarity is a Stoic act. Removing yourself from a toxic dynamic is a Stoic act. These are controlled, virtuous responses. They come from strength, not fear. Think of a coworker who constantly interrupts you. The old pattern is to simmer, to eventually snap, or to shrink. The trained response is different. Before the next meeting, you decide on your virtue. You choose patience and courage. When the interruption happens, you pause. You see it as their habit, their lack of awareness, their problem. Then you act. You might say, gently but firmly, I'd like to finish my point, and then I'm eager to hear your thoughts. You've practiced justice, giving them a turn, while maintaining your own dignity. You use the social weight to build your strength. so here's a reflective prompt. Think of one challenging person in your orbit, a relative, a neighbor, a colleague. Now, identify one single Stoic virtue you could consciously practice in your next interaction with them. Just one. Is it patience to listen fully before reacting? Is it courage to speak a kind but necessary truth? Is it understanding to make a genuine effort to see the world from behind their eyes? Your assignment isn't to change them, it's to use the friction they provide to polish your own character. In that social gym, they are the resistance. And resistance is what creates strength. In Stoic thought, poverty wasn't a failure. Sometimes it was the advanced course. Their training in discomfort moved from the personal into the material world. A life full of possessions, full of comforts, was seen as a life full of dependencies. Every luxury you rely on is a thread. It ties your happiness to something outside your control. Seneca had immense wealth. He understood this paradox. He wrote that poverty, if it follows natural law, is actually great wealth. This wasn't about romanticizing hardship. It was a psychological point. When you strip away the non-essentials, you're forced to meet yourself. You find what you actually need to be content. It's almost always less than you think. That discovery is the real wealth. It's self-sufficiency, the kind no market crash can take away. Epictetus was born a slave. He framed it even more sharply. Freedom isn't secured by filling your purse, he said. It's secured by shedding your desires. He taught that the correct use of your impressions, your judgments, is your only true possession. A person chained by craving is a prisoner, even in a palace. A person who has mastered their wants is free, even in a simple room. The anxiety about lack, it's rarely about survival. It's about a story we attach to things, the story that without a certain car or house we are less worthy, less secure. Material lack, whether chosen or encountered, cuts through that story. It asks the direct question, are you still you without that thing? The answer that comes back is usually a quiet, steady yes. You see a clear echo of this in modern minimalism. In intentional frugality, when someone chooses to live with less, not just to save money but to clear mental space, they're running a Stoic experiment. They're testing the hypothesis that happiness is an internal condition. Each item they remove is a variable they control for. Does its absence create anxiety or a surprising sense of lightness? The goal isn't austerity for its own sake. It's the freedom of knowing your peace isn't stored in a storage unit. Your value isn't displayed on your shelves. This reduces financial anxiety at the root. Your sense of security shifts from a fluctuating bank balance to the unshakable resource of your own adaptability. So consider a simplicity audit. Look around your living space or your daily routines. Identify one possession or one comfort you rely on automatically. It could be a streaming service you scroll mindlessly, a particular brand of coffee, the habit of buying lunch out every day. The challenge isn't to renounce it forever, but to choose to go without it for a defined period. A week, maybe. Use that absence as your observation deck. Notice what arises. Do you feel a restless itch, a sense of deprivation? Or does a space open up, a space where you might read or talk or simply sit with a quiet mind? That space and your relationship to it is the lesson. It's the curriculum of enough. A fever for a Stoic was a call to practice. It was a chance to endure what you can't change. This is the most intimate training ground. When your own body brings pain or weakness, your mind is tested directly. Will it become frantic, trapped by the sensation, or can it learn to be a calm observer even there? The Stoic idea wasn't to ignore illness. It wasn't to refuse medicine. It was a dual focus. You attend to the body with practical care, and you attend to the mind with philosophical care. The real work happens in that space between the physical sensation and your judgment about it. The pain is one thing. The story of misery you wrap around it, that's another. Seneca wrote some of his most powerful letters while he was unwell. Confined to his bed, he turned his attention inward. He reflected that illness forces stillness. It can strip away life's distractions. It creates a quiet laboratory for the mind. He wrote about using the time not for complaint, but for contemplation. To examine his life, his values, his readiness for whatever came next. The fever, the ache, they became his teacher in patience. They taught him to watch the discomfort, its ebb and flow, without letting it flood his entire identity. He was practicing the separation. The body feels, but the mind interprets, and that interpretation, that's where your freedom lies. So what does this look like now, with an ordinary headache or a common cold? The modern impulse is to rush toward distraction, to numb the discomfort with medication and immediately fill the space with screens, with busyness to escape the feeling. The Stoic response is different. First, you take the practical step. You drink water, you rest, you take appropriate care. Then, you engage in the training. You turn your attention toward the sensation itself with a gentle curiosity. Where exactly is the pain located? Is it a sharp pulse or a dull pressure? Does it remain constant or does it rise and fall? You're not trying to increase the suffering. You're practicing observation without addition. You notice the immediate urge to think, this is terrible, I can't stand this. And you consciously choose not to follow that story. You might simply acknowledge there is a sensation of pain in my head. My body is signaling. I am here, observing this signal. I am not the signal itself. This shifts the experience from being assaulted by pain to witnessing a process within your body. It cultivates a profound patience. You learn to sit with what is without demanding that it be different right now. In that acceptance, a subtle strength emerges. The pain may not vanish, but its power to dominate your inner world diminishes. You have maintained your character, your composure, even in a state of weakness. Think back to a recent minor illness. A sore throat, an upset stomach, a day in bed with fatigue. Recall the mental chatter that likely came with it, the frustration at interrupted plans, the boredom, the repetitive focus on the discomfort. Now consider how a Stoic mindset might have altered that. Instead of fighting the reality of being unwell, you could have met it with a deliberate presence. You could have used the forced pause to listen to an audiobook that enriched your mind, or to simply rest with an awareness of your breathing. The illness would have been the same physical event, but your internal journey through it could have been different, one of quiet fortitude, not restless resistance. In the Stoic Training Manual, a public failure wasn't a closed door. It was a performance review from fortune. The discomfort you feel after a project flops, that sinking feeling, it's rarely about the facts, it's about a story. A story of wounded pride, of being seen as less capable. The Stoics saw that story as the real obstacle. The failure itself was just data, raw feedback on what you can control and what you cannot. Epictetus had a radical piece of advice for anyone wanting to grow. He said, if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid in external matters. That's the training, to separate your self-worth from the external verdict. The failure reveals a gap, maybe in your preparation or your skill. That's the part in your control. The shame, the judgment, the opinion of others, that's the part that is not. Your growth depends on sorting the two. Take a failed presentation. You prepared for weeks, but the delivery felt flat. The questions were skeptical. The final decision went another way. The immediate story is one of humiliation, but the Stoic analysis starts with a simple split. What was truly within your sphere of influence, your research, your rehearsal, the clarity of your slides? That's your arena. The audience's reaction, their pre-existing biases, the final outcome decided by factors you may never know, that's fortune's arena. The training is to pour all your attention into the first list, to ask, based on this feedback, what could I improve for next time? Was my preparation as thorough as it could have been? Did I communicate the core idea with enough simplicity? This turns the energy of the setback into fuel. the emotional sting of the second list, you learn to observe it. Like a weather pattern passing through without letting it define your climate, this reframes the entire experience. You are no longer a victim of a bad day. You are a student receiving a difficult lesson. Fortune, in her blunt way, has pointed directly at a muscle that needs strengthening. Maybe it's the muscle of resilience in the face of skepticism, or the muscle of detaching your joy from a specific result. The failure becomes the resistance that makes that muscle grow. So here's a reflective prompt. Think of a recent setback, even a small one. Write down two things. First, write the emotional sting in a single sentence. Just name it. Then, on a separate line, write one actionable lesson the event provided. One thing you genuinely control and can work on. The space between those two lines is where Stoic training lives. It's where you receive the review without internalizing the criticism. Where you use the fall not as proof you can't walk, but as a map showing you where the ground is uneven. The Stoics saw where most of our trouble comes from. Wanting things we can't have, trying to avoid things we can't avoid. That basic mismatch, it's what drives anxiety, frustration, that feeling of being against the world. Whenever you feel that internal friction, it's a signal. Your wants, your aversions, they've drifted outside the circle of what you control. You want a promotion, but that's your boss's call. You want to avoid a hard conversation, but life keeps putting it in front of you. In both cases, you've tied your peace to something external, and the current of events will always pull at that anchor. That's what creates the turmoil. Epictetus made this the core of everything. He said happiness and freedom require one thing: correct desire and correct aversion. Correct desire is wanting only what's in your power. Correct aversion is being opposed only to what's in your power to avoid, and what's always in your power. Your choices, your efforts, your character, to desire virtue, to act with courage, justice, wisdom, self-control right now, to be averse only to vice, to acting with cowardice, injustice, foolishness, lack of discipline. Everything else, all the external prizes and problems, become what they called indifference. You might prefer them or not, but you don't stake your happiness on them. This is the training. It's a constant, gentle audit of your impulses. You feel that pull of wanting, you pause, you ask, is this a desire for an outcome I control, or for my own virtuous effort toward it? You feel that push of dread, you ask, is this an aversion to an external event, or to the possibility I might act poorly in facing it? Take wanting validation. You post something online and you keep checking for likes, for comments. The discomfort of waiting, the little drop when the response is quiet, that's your signal. Your desire has become misaligned. You've started to desire the external approval, the reaction of others, which you can't command. The training is to reframe the desire. Before you post, you set your intention. Your desire is not for 100 likes. Your desire is to express yourself honestly, to share something you believe has value. Your desire is for the virtue of courage in putting your voice out there. The outcome, the reaction that goes into its proper place, it's a preferred indifferent. It would be nice, but it's not the source of your satisfaction. Your satisfaction was already secured in the act of posting with integrity, or take the fear of a necessary conflict. You need to address something with a family member. Your aversion is screaming to avoid it, to keep the peace. That aversion is misaligned if it's focused on the external event, the potential awkwardness, their possible anger. The realignment is to shift your aversion. What should you truly be averse to? You should be averse to acting viciously, to being dishonest by avoiding the truth, to being unjust by letting a resentment grow, to lacking the courage to speak kindly but clearly. Your aversion now fuels the right action. It pushes you not away from the conversation, but toward entering it with the right character. So here's a prompt. Identify one common desire in your life that's tied to an external outcome. Maybe it's a specific result at work, a particular reaction from someone you care about. A change in your circumstances that depends on factors outside your hands. Now try the realignment. Reframe that desire. Instead of desiring the outcome, desire your own virtuous effort within the process. Desire to be diligent, creative, resilient as you work toward it. Desire to act with kindness and patience in the relationship, regardless of the reaction. This small mental pivot doesn't guarantee the external result, but it does guarantee something else, your own inner harmony, no matter what the world brings back. Stoic resilience had a cosmic dimension. It wasn't just psychological. They saw themselves as part of a vast, rational order. That was the bedrock, the universe, nature. The logos wasn't chaotic. It was a living, intelligent system, everything connected, everything happened for a reason. So your personal struggle wasn't a random glitch. It was a necessary note in a grand symphony. That belief changed endurance. It became a kind of sacred participation. Marcus Aurelius kept returning to this. He wrote to accept whatever happens as it suits the whole. What doesn't benefit the hive doesn't benefit the bee. That image captures it. The bee doesn't understand the hive's purpose, but it trusts its role. The Stoic trusted their hardship served a purpose in the universal hive. It was preparing them, strengthening the whole in some unseen way. That's what living in accordance with nature meant. It wasn't about being outdoors. It was aligning your will with the rational flow of the cosmos, accepting your assigned part, even when your chapter felt difficult. That context made personal sacrifice meaningful. When you endure a loss, face a fear, you aren't just solving a personal problem. You're fulfilling your function within a complex system. Your resilience becomes a contribution to the order of all things. It fosters a deep acceptance beyond mere tolerance. You can see a modern parallel in ecology. In a healthy forest, a lightning strike causes a fire. For a single tree, it's a catastrophe. For the forest ecosystem, the fire clears old growth. It returns nutrients to the soil. It allows for new life, destructive at one level, generative at another. The Stoics applied that cosmic perspective to a human life. Your personal fire might feel devastating. But could it be clearing space for new growth? Could it be returning strength to the soil of your character? This viewpoint doesn't ask you to enjoy the flames. It asks you to trust in the resilience of the forest you're a part of. Every Stoic athlete kept a training log. It was a journal, but not for events. It was a place to debrief their mental workouts. A kind of laboratory for dissecting their reactions. We have a famous example, the private notebook of a Roman emperor, Marcus Aurelius. He never meant for it to be published. He called these writings his meditations, and they are the ultimate training log, a record of a man reminding himself of his principles, analyzing his failures, preparing his mind for the next day's challenges. He was coaching himself on paper through the pressures of ruling an empire. That's the power of it. It turns experience into insight. You take the raw material of your day, the frustrations, the anxieties, the small victories, and you process it. You move it from feeling, from that chaotic realm, into the clear light of examination. The Stoics had a structure for this, an evening review. As the day wound down, they'd ask a series of questions. What discomforts arose today? How did I respond? Where did I follow my principles and where did I stray? What's one thing I can do better tomorrow? This review wasn't self-criticism, it was calibration. Honest calibration, like a carpenter checking their level. You're not angry at the tool for being off. You just adjust it so the next cut is true. To make it practical, imagine a simple 3-question template. For tonight, first, what was the most significant challenge to my peace today? Name it plainly. The difficult conversation, the unexpected delay, the wave of worry about the future. Second, how did I meet it? Did I react with an automatic story of frustration? Or did I create a space, a pause, for a more deliberate response? Be honest without judgment. Third, based on this, what's one small adjustment for tomorrow? Maybe it's a reminder to pause before speaking when you feel defensive, or a decision to do your most important task before checking email. To build focus, that adjustment is your training plan for the next session. This practice builds self-awareness, and it builds it fast. You start to see patterns. You notice your peace is most often disrupted not by major crises, but by your own unchecked interpretations of minor events. The journal becomes the mirror. It shows you your mental habits, and with that clarity, you can begin to change them. So here's a place to start. Tonight, before you rest, try a one-sentence Stoic journal entry. Reflect on just one instance, one moment of discomfort today. It could be as small as a sigh of irritation in a long line. Write one sentence that names the challenge and your relationship to it. For example, when the meeting ran late, I noticed my impatience, but I chose to listen fully instead of mentally checking out. That single act of recognition, that's the first rep. In a new kind of workout, it's where you become both the athlete and the coach of your own mind. That calm after a workout, that deep, settled feeling. The Stoics wanted that for the mind. They called it Apatheia, a clear, unshakable peace. That's where all the training was headed. Not apathy, not a cold detachment. It was freedom. Freedom from those destructive passions, the pain that just toss you around. That's the fruit of all the work, aligning your desires, guarding your judgments, seeing externals with a wise indifference. It's a proactive tranquility. The mind, trained through discomfort, can now engage with the world from a place of strength, not from a reactive storm. Think of a lake on a windy day. The surface is churned by every gust. It reflects nothing clearly, just reacts. That's the untrained mind, buffeted by every irritation, every fear. Apatheia is the still, deep lake. The wind still blows, events still happen, but the depths stay calm. The surface might ripple, but it doesn't lose its clarity. It reflects the sky. From that depth, you see reality as it is, not as your frantic emotions distort it. This state allows for full engagement. The Stoic isn't withdrawn. They're more present because they're not wasting energy on internal wars. Seneca said the wise person is disturbed by nothing, not because they feel nothing, but because they overcome everything. Their joy isn't a frantic giddiness, afraid it will end. It's a steady, quiet gladness from living in accordance with their nature. Their compassion isn't a draining empathy, taking on the suffering of others. It's a clear-eyed kindness. It seeks to help from a position of stability. Take two responses to a crisis. A project at work collapses. The reactive mind is hijacked. First, a surge of panic, then anger, looking for someone to blame. Anxiety spins stories of ruin. The thinking brain goes offline. Decisions are rushed. Communication gets sharp, defensive. The person is in the storm and they're adding to the chaos. Now, the response from Apatheia. The same bad news arrives. There's a recognition of the seriousness, a quick assessment of the facts, but no internal panic because the mind is trained. It automatically sorts what's within my control right now. It focuses there. The energy that would have been anger or fear is channeled into solution building. The person speaks calmly, asks clear questions, rallies the team with focus. They're in the same storm, but they've become the steady helm. Their tranquility isn't passive. It's the most active force in the room. It creates order from the chaos. So here's a question, not a distant fantasy, but something for the next day. What would a single day feel like if your core state was this calm clarity? Not a day where nothing goes wrong. That's not the test. A day where, when things do go wrong, you're not buffeted by every discomfort, where a frustration is met with a breath and a recalibration. Not a spiral, where a difficult interaction is a training ground in patience, not a trigger for resentment. The space between an event and your response feels wider. Quieter, your energy is conserved. Your joy in small things is sharper because it isn't competing with background worry. This isn't a supernatural state. It's the cultivated result of the training. It's the mind finally coming home to its own strength. It's this idea that our chase for ease might be what's making us unstable. A Stoic thought: we've built a world to reduce friction everywhere, instant answers, perfect deliveries, environments tailored to us, and yet there's this background hum of anxiety. The Stoics would say that's not a coincidence, it's a direct result. By trying to remove all discomfort, we've weakened our most important muscle, our ability to handle life when it isn't comfortable. You become like someone who only walks on smooth pavement. Their leg muscles grow weak. Then when they hit a hill or a rocky path, they're terrified. They feel betrayed by the terrain, but the problem was never the hill. It was the lack of preparation. Seneca saw this in ancient Rome. He noticed that constant luxury doesn't create strength. It creates a softness, a heightened fear of change. He wrote that fortune can take away what she's given, but she can't take away what you've learned to live without. When you tie your well-being to external comforts, you make yourself a hostage to fortune's whims. Every comfort becomes a potential point of future pain. The more you have, the more you have to lose, and so your mind, instead of being at peace, becomes a vigilant guard, anxiously monitoring all your possessions, your status, your conveniences for any sign of threat. That's the illusion, the belief that more comfort equals more security. In reality, it often equals more vulnerability. Look at our relationship with technology. Tools designed to eliminate the smallest inconveniences. A slow internet connection feels like a personal affront. A delayed text reply can spiral into a story of social rejection. We've outsourced so much mental work, navigation, memory, even basic calculation that we feel a low-grade panic when we're disconnected. The tool meant to reduce stress becomes a new source of it. Because we've forgotten how to be okay without it, or the social pressure to keep a perfect, conflict-free image, we avoid difficult conversations. We curate our lives to show only ease and success. But that avoidance creates a different kind of friction, an internal one, the stress of upholding the facade, the anxiety that someone will see behind the curtain. The Stoic embrace of productive friction is the antidote. They understood a life without resistance produces a weak character. Just as a sword is tempered by fire and hammering, our minds are tempered by meeting difficulty, not by fleeing from it. So here's a reflective prompt. Conduct a small audit in one area of your life where you prioritize comfort over growth. It might be your daily routine, so optimized for ease it leaves no room for spontaneous challenge. It might be a relationship where you avoid unnecessary talk to keep the peace. It might be your consumption of entertainment, filling every quiet moment and leaving no space for boredom, which is often the precursor to creativity. Identify that one area. Now consider one tiny, intentional change, not a life overhaul, a small injection of productive friction. Maybe it's turning off notifications for 1 hour each day to practice tolerating the itch of missing out. Maybe it's having that conversation you've been putting off, focusing on the virtue of courage rather than the comfort of silence. That small act is a rebellion against the illusion. It's you choosing to walk on the rocky path, to strengthen the muscles of your mind, to trade the fragile security of a padded world for the robust stability that comes from knowing you can handle the uneven ground. Stoicism was a survival toolkit. It was for some of the most pressured lives in history. These principles weren't abstract, they were an operating system. For people in impossible situations, their stories are the case studies. They show what the training looks like under extreme pressure. Cato the Younger. His whole political life was a stand against corruption. This was during the fall of the Roman Republic. Then Julius Caesar marched on Rome. He seized power. And Cato faced a choice. He could swear allegiance to a dictator, live in comfort, or he could hold to his principles, the principles of republican liberty. Knowing it would likely cost him everything, he chose integrity. After Caesar's final victory, Cato took his own life, rather than live under a tyranny. That defiance wasn't a rash act of despair. It was a final application of his Stoic beliefs. He controlled his choice to remain free in spirit, even when his body could not be. His life illustrated that line about not claiming what is not your own. He refused to claim a life of compromised virtue. He would not call it his own. Then there's Seneca, a man of immense wealth and influence. He was an advisor to Emperor Nero. He spent years practicing poverty voluntarily, reminding himself that his peace was internal. But his training was tested in the most severe way when Nero ordered him to end his own life. Seneca faced that ultimate discomfort, not with panic but with a chilling calm. Historical accounts describe him comforting his grieving friends, discussing philosophy, meeting his end with deliberate composure. He was applying the premeditation of evils. To its final conclusion, he had rehearsed loss, and in his final moments he demonstrated that his tranquility was not dependent on fortune's favor. His life was the practical example of seeing externals, even life itself, as preferred indifference, while virtue remained the only true good, and Marcus Aurelius, the emperor himself. He wrote his private journal not in a quiet study, but on military campaigns along the frozen Danube frontier. He ruled during constant wars and a devastating plague that swept through the empire. The weight of countless lives was on his shoulders: military logistics, political intrigue, personal grief. His meditations are the direct output of his daily training. In them, we see him applying the view from above to maintain perspective, practicing the discipline of assent to manage his reactions to treacherous senators. Reminding himself of his duty to the cosmic whole, his reign was a lifelong demonstration of the principle that the obstacle is the way. He didn't have the luxury to retreat from discomfort. He had to lead from within it, using Stoicism as his compass through relentless storms. These individuals weren't mythical saints, they were flawed humans who used a philosophical framework to navigate real, crushing adversity. Their lives make the theory concrete. Cato shows us the ultimate cost of aligning desire with virtue. Seneca shows us the final test of practicing indifference to externals. Marcus shows us the daily grind of applying these tools under the weight of supreme responsibility. The Stoic gym, it's still around, just in modern branches. You'll find the equipment in therapy offices, in locker rooms, in startup hubs. These ancient practices for building mental stability, they didn't disappear. They were rediscovered, repackaged, often under different names because they work. One clear parallel is in modern psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT, at its core, it's a clinical application of the Stoic discipline of assent. It teaches people to identify their automatic negative thoughts, those first impressions of catastrophe, of unfairness, and to challenge them, to ask, is this thought true? What's the evidence for it and against it? What's a more balanced way to see the situation? That's exactly what Epictetus was training his students to do 2,000 years ago. To catch the story their mind was telling and interrogate it before agreeing. Modern research validates this. Studies show that challenging our cognitive distortions, our flawed judgments, that's a powerful way to reduce anxiety. To build emotional resilience, it's the Stoic Toolkit translated into a therapeutic framework. Then look at high-performance arenas, elite athletes. Special forces soldiers, they don't just train their bodies, they systematically train their minds under stress. This is called stress inoculation. They create controlled, high-pressure scenarios in practice, so that during actual competition, during a mission, their minds don't panic. They've been there before. A Navy SEAL enduring brutal cold water exposure. That's a modern version of Seneca's voluntary poverty. They're proving to their own nervous system that extreme discomfort is endurable, that they can keep their thinking clear even when their body is screaming to quit. The Stoic would call this preparing to meet fortune's blows with a steady mind. The coach calls it building mental toughness. The principle is identical. In the world of entrepreneurship, we talk about grit, the ability to persevere through failure, through rejection, through long periods of uncertainty. This is pure Stoic training applied to business. Every failed startup, every critical investor, every product that flops, that's a rep. It's the resistance. Founders who cultivate grit, they've learned to separate their self-worth from the external outcome. They focus on what they can control, their effort, their iteration, their resilience, while treating market validation as a preferred indifferent. They exemplify the idea that the obstacle, the repeated no, becomes the way. It forces smarter innovation, tougher skin, a deeper commitment to the problem they're solving. Even in clinical settings, you see direct descendants. Exposure therapy, used to treat phobias and anxiety disorders. It's a structured, therapeutic form of voluntary discomfort. A person afraid of social situations will gradually, with support, place themselves in slightly anxious social settings. Not to suffer, but to train, to learn through direct experience that the feared catastrophe doesn't occur, and that they can tolerate the anxiety. This is the Stoic Premeditation of Evils, turned into a step-by-step healing protocol. They are walking calmly toward what they fear to disarm it. So here's a reflective prompt. Look at one area of your own modern life, your work, a sport or hobby, an artistic pursuit, or even your personal relationships. Where do you see these Stoic principles of training through difficulty already being applied? Even if no one calls it philosophy, is it in the deliberate practice of a musician, repeating a difficult passage until it's effortless? Is it in a project team doing a pre-mortem, imagining everything that could go wrong to build a better plan? Is it in your own decision to have a hard conversation you've been avoiding? Identify that one instance, see it for what it is, a modern session in the ancient gym. Your conscious recognition of that pattern, that's the first step toward using it, not by accident but by design. Stoic training has a safety rule. It's for building strength. Not for martyrdom, not for enduring truly destructive environments. That's a nuance people often miss. The goal was never to endure the unbearable just to prove a point. The goal was to cultivate a wise mind, a discerning mind, one that could tell the difference between a productive challenge and a genuine threat to your core well-being. The virtues they trained: wisdom, justice, they demand that distinction. To endure abuse in the name of resilience would be a failure of wisdom. It would be an injustice to yourself. The Stoics were committed to preserving their rational faculty above all else, that inner citadel. If a situation was systematically poisoning that citadel, breaking down your capacity for clear judgment, for moral action, then the Stoic imperative wasn't to endure. It was to remove yourself, to seek a healthier environment, a place where virtue could actually be practiced. That wasn't quitting, it was applying a higher principle. You can't practice justice or courage or self-control if you're in a state of survival, under constant assault. The training ground has to be challenging, not corrosive. Think about the clear contrast. Enduring a difficult workout where your muscles burn, your lungs ache, that's productive discomfort. It creates adaptation. It makes you stronger, you're in control, you can stop. The environment is demanding, but it's fundamentally safe. Now picture enduring a psychologically abusive relationship. The constant criticism, the manipulation, the erosion of your self-worth. That isn't a training ground, it's a demolition site. It breaks down your inner stability. It attacks the very rational faculty the Stoics sought to protect. Staying in that situation isn't resilience, it's a misunderstanding of the entire philosophy. The ancient texts support this. They praised enduring fortune's blows, yes, but they also spoke of the wise person knowing when to walk away from a hopeless political situation, or to avoid the company of the vicious. Epictetus advised that if you're in a ship that's sinking, you're not obligated to go down with it. You take the lifeboat. Your duty is to your own reasoned choice, to your moral purpose. If that purpose is being systematically destroyed, your duty is to preserve it elsewhere. So where's that line in a modern life? It's the difference between a demanding job that stretches your skills and a toxic workplace that demands your soul. One challenges you to grow, the other depletes your humanity. It's the difference between a difficult family conversation that seeks understanding and a recurring dynamic of manipulation and guilt. One is friction you can work with, the other is a trap you have to see clearly. Here's a prompt for your own life. Think of one ongoing source of significant discomfort. Apply this litmus test. Ask yourself, is this situation primarily building a virtue in me, patience, courage, focus, or is it primarily degrading my sense of peace, my self-respect, my ability to think clearly? Does it feel like resistance in the gym or like a poison in the system? Your honest answer to that question isn't a sign of weakness. It's the highest expression of Stoic wisdom. Knowing what to change, what to accept, and what to walk away from, that's the master skill. The training is meant to give you the clarity to make that call. Theory is useless without practice, so let's draft a personal mental fitness plan. A Stoic training regimen. It's not about sudden, harsh trials. It's a gentle curriculum. One you design for yourself. The goal is to build the muscle of equanimity, not to break your spirit, so we start small, and we start specific. Think of it like learning a language. You wouldn't begin by trying to give a complex speech. You'd learn a few basic phrases, practice them daily, slowly build your vocabulary. Your mind's resilience works the same way. First, the training grounds. There are 4 main arenas where you can introduce productive friction. The physical arena. This is about tolerating bodily sensations you'd normally avoid. A 60-second cold shower at the end of your warm one, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, going for a walk without a podcast, just with the sounds around you. The social arena. This trains your response to interpersonal friction. It could be giving a sincere compliment to someone you find difficult, or asking a clarifying question in a meeting instead of staying silent with a doubt. Having that small, postponed conversation with kindness. The mental arena. This challenges your attention and cravings. A 24-hour digital fast from non-essential screens. Reading a challenging book for 30 minutes instead of scrolling. Practicing single tasking on a work project for 1 focused hour. The emotional arena. This redirects your internal narrative. It's practicing gratitude the moment you feel a wave of frustration. Writing down 3 things that went well at the end of a tough day. Mentally wishing someone well who irritated you. Seneca's insight is our guide here. He reminded himself that fortune can snatch away our possessions, our status, even our health. But she cannot take away our trained character. The value of this regimen isn't in the discomfort itself. It's in the quiet proof it provides, proof that you are more than your cravings for ease. That your peace has roots deeper than your circumstances. Here's a sample 1-week plan, not as a prescription but as a template for how gentle this can be. Monday, physical. End your shower with 30 seconds of cold water. Tuesday, mental. Eat 1 meal today without any screen, just with your own thoughts or the company of others. Wednesday, emotional. When you feel your first spike of irritation today, pause and mentally list 1 thing in that moment you're grateful for. Thursday, social. Offer a genuine thank you to a colleague or service worker you usually interact with on autopilot. Friday, mental. Leave your phone in another room for 1 hour in the evening. Saturday, physical. Take a 20-minute walk without a destination, just to observe your neighborhood. Sunday, emotional. Write down 1 past difficulty you are now, in some way, grateful for and why. The emphasis is always on consistency over intensity. A 1-minute cold shower done daily for a month builds more resilience than a 5-minute ice bath you never repeat. The point is the ritual, meeting a small resistance and choosing your response. So here is your reflective prompt. Your first step before this day ends: look at the categories, choose just one, then choose one tiny, specific voluntary discomfort within it. Something so small it feels almost trivial. Now schedule it. Decide when tomorrow you will do it. Write it in your calendar if you need to. The act of choosing and scheduling is the first rep. It's you moving from theory into the gym. Your training begins not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet, scheduled appointment with a minor challenge. That is how you build a stable mind, one conscious small victory at a time. Stoics didn't usually train alone. They looked for teachers, they looked for friends. They looked for texts, something to guide them and something to challenge them. That was a central part of it. The mental gym wasn't just a private, silent room. It was more like a dojo with instructors, with other students. You could practice the forms by yourself, sure, but without a teacher to correct your posture, without a partner to test your reactions, progress would be slow. You might even be practicing the wrong moves and not even know it. A community gives you 3 things: perspective, correction, encouragement. Your own mind on its own can rationalize anything. It can turn avoidance into wisdom. It can turn stubbornness into principle. A trusted teacher can see that. A thoughtful friend can see that blind spot. They can ask the question you're avoiding. They can point out where your judgment has drifted, where it's outside your control. Epictetus didn't just write his thoughts down in a vacuum. He ran a school, students lived there, they learned together, constant dialogue. They'd bring their daily challenges and he would dissect their reasoning. Often with sharp, memorable clarity. His teachings were a conversation. Seneca's greatest works are his letters, written to his friend Lucilius. They're a record of shared growth. Seneca wasn't lecturing from a mountain. He was walking the path alongside someone, offering encouragement, admitting his own struggles, refining ideas through exchange. The community was the sounding board. Today, that function is filled by modern communities. They exist online, in local discussion groups, in book clubs focused on practical philosophy. These spaces serve the same purpose. You can post about a frustration. Others can offer a Stoic reframe you hadn't considered. You can read how someone else applied a principle to a problem like yours. This shared discourse turns abstract ideas into lived experience. It reminds you you're not the first person to feel this way, not the first to face this kind of obstacle. The wisdom of 2,000 years of collective practice is there, waiting. So here's a practical step. Consider joining one philosophy discussion group. Even if it's just an online forum you read for a few minutes each week. Look for a local reading group that focuses on practical wisdom. The goal isn't to find people who agree with you on everything. It's to find people committed to the same kind of honest inquiry, to the same project, building a better, more resilient character. Your reflective prompt is this. Who in your life right now could be a conversation partner for these ideas? It might be a friend who values growth, a family member interested in history, a colleague who approaches problems with calm logic. Or if no one comes to mind immediately, explore one single online Stoic resource this week, a reputable blog, a podcast episode, a forum thread. The act of seeking out that shared discourse is itself a training rep. It's you stepping into the dojo, looking for a sparring partner for your mind. You know you're getting somewhere when you start noticing these small changes in how you react. The Stoics had a word for that person, the prokopton, someone who's progressing. Not a sage, not perfect, but moving forward. They were focused on the journey itself, the quality of each step, not some perfect destination far off. Progress isn't about the absence of discomfort. It's about a different relationship to it. The friction is still there, but you move through it differently. Your internal metrics start to shift, and you can measure this in quiet, observable signs. The first sign is a quicker recovery. A project fails, a plan falls apart. The initial sting is still real, but instead of that feeling lingering for days, coloring everything, it settles faster. You observe the disappointment, you learn from it, and then you consciously redirect your energy toward what's next. The storm of emotion doesn't last as long. Your mind, like a trained muscle, returns to its resting state quicker. It's less easily exhausted by misfortune. The second sign is a reduction in complaining, especially about things you can't change. You catch yourself starting to vent about the weather, or traffic, or a colleague's habit, and you just stop. Not because you're suppressing it, but because you see the futility. You recognize that vocalizing that resistance adds nothing. It only amplifies the discomfort. So you let the observation pass in silence. You conserve that mental energy for something useful. Your speech becomes more deliberate, less reactive. And that leads to the third sign, more deliberate responses. There's a longer, more comfortable pause between an event and your reaction. Someone says something that could be taken as an insult. In that space, you don't fire back, you assess, you consider the source, you choose your words, you might even choose silence. Your actions start to feel more like chosen moves in a game and less like involuntary spasms. Beneath it all, you might notice a fourth sign, a slightly higher baseline of calm. It's not that you're never anxious or irritated. It's that your default setting, your emotional home base, feels a little more settled. There's a background hum of steadiness that wasn't there before. Minor annoyances bounce off this new baseline without leaving a dent. You carry an inner quiet that doesn't depend on outer quiet. Think of a before and after snapshot. Before, a delayed flight is a personal catastrophe. It triggers a cascade. This ruins everything. This airline is terrible. My whole schedule is wrecked. The energy is frantic, adversarial. After some progress, the same delay happens. You feel that initial flicker of frustration. Then you take a deliberate breath. You sort it out. The delay is not in your control. Your reaction is. You open a book you've been meaning to read. You use the time to plan the first day of your trip. The delay is an inconvenience, but it's no longer an enemy. It's just a circumstance. You've changed the relationship. The Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus observed that we suffer not from events, but from our judgments about them. Progress is watching those judgments soften. It's feeling less internal resistance to the unavoidable flow of life. You stop arguing with reality so much. You engage with it, work with it, even when it's not to your liking. So here's a prompt. Since you started engaging with these ideas, can you identify one small, specific sign of progress in yourself? It doesn't have to be dramatic. Maybe you caught a complaint before it left your lips this week. Maybe you took one deep breath during a stressful moment instead of immediately reacting. Maybe you noticed a minor setback didn't spoil your entire day like it used to. That small observation is your evidence. It's the proof that the training is working, one conscious moment at a time. After enough repetition, the training starts to fade. You're not practicing Stoicism anymore. You're becoming someone where that stability is just natural. That's the final integration. The principles stop being a tool you pick up. They become the hand that picks up everything else. It's like the difference between remembering to breathe and just being a breathing person. The shift is from conscious effort to unconscious character. The ancient philosophers had a framework for this. They called it hexis, a stable disposition. A settled state of character. It's what happens when you practice a skill, a techne, for so long it becomes part of you. You don't decide to be resilient in a crisis. You just are, because that's who you've trained yourself to become. Your reactions have been rewired by countless small choices. The pause before judgment, the sorting of control, the quiet acceptance. These aren't strategies you recall. They're the pathways your thoughts now automatically travel. Think of learning to drive. At first, every action is conscious, clumsy. You think about the clutch, the mirror, the turn signal. Your mind is loud with instructions, but after months of practice, you don't think about those steps. You just drive. Your hands and feet know what to do. You've developed a hexis for driving. The skill has been absorbed into your nervous system. Stoic resilience aims for the same destination. The daily mental reps, the cold shower, the reframed frustration, the evening review, those are the practice sessions. Over time, you stop thinking about the dichotomy of control in a traffic jam. You just naturally settle into observing your own impatience without being ruled by it. The obstacle arises, and without a conscious internal lecture, your mind begins looking for the way forward. Not because you're forcing it, but because that's the direction it's been trained to look. This is where philosophy becomes identity. You're no longer a person trying to be calm. You are a calm person encountering a challenge. The virtue isn't something you perform. It's a quality you embody. Marcus Aurelius, in his private writings, wasn't trying to convince himself of Stoic ideas. He was reinforcing a disposition he was actively living. He was speaking to himself from within that hexis, strengthening it with every line. He wrote to himself, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be." Be one. That imperative points directly to this integration. Stop debating the theory and live the practice until the practice is you. So what does this look like in a life? It shows up in the tone of your inner voice. Instead of a critical, anxious narrator, it becomes a calm, observational guide. It shows up in your physical presence. Less tension in the shoulders, a steadier breath under pressure. It shows up in your relationships. You stop needing to win arguments or manage perceptions, because your worth isn't on the line in every interaction. You can engage with clarity and kindness because your stability isn't borrowed from the approval of others. Here's a reflective prompt to make this tangible. Envision your future self 6 months from now. Imagine you've practiced these principles consistently, not perfectly but faithfully. A major inconvenience arrives, a flight cancellation that strands you overnight, a last-minute critical work deadline, a significant unexpected expense. How does that future version of you typically react? Do they spiral into panic and blame, or do they take a slow breath and begin assessing options? Do they feel victimized by the event, or do they feel capable, even while acknowledging the difficulty? The gap between your current instinct and that envisioned response is the space where your hexis is built. Each small, daily choice is a brick in that foundation. You are constructing the person who meets that future inconvenience, one conscious rep at a time. Your relationship with discomfort has changed. It's not something to avoid anymore. It's more like a teacher, a necessary one. That's really what this all comes down to. You used to see any irritation as a threat, something that was going to ruin your peace. Now you might start to see it differently, as an invitation to train, and all those ideas we went through, they're like the equipment. The gear in that mental gym. It's reframing a hard thing as a rep, not a punishment. It's sorting everything out into what's up to you and what isn't. And then putting your energy only into that first column, the things you can control. It's choosing a small challenge on purpose to prove to yourself that circumstance doesn't own you. And then there's that deeper step, Amor Fati, a kind of embrace where you see the obstacle itself as the path, the way forward, so mental stability, it isn't a fortress. It's not a castle you hide inside, it's a muscle, and a muscle only gets stronger through resistance, through meeting friction again and again, and choosing to engage with it. Not to run from it. Every time you stop before you react, every time you catch a thought that says everything is ruined, every time you pick the harder right thing instead of the easy wrong one. That's a rep. You're adding a fiber, building that inner strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. He was in his tent on the edge of an empire at war. And he wrote that the mind adapts. It turns the obstacle into its own purpose. The impediment to action actually advances the action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's the shift. Your mind stops being a victim of what happens. It becomes an alchemist. It takes the raw lead of a bad moment and turns it into gold. Into character, the obstacle isn't just something that happens to you anymore. It's material, something you work with. So as we finish, here's one thing to do. Look back on those principles. Which one stuck with you? Was it the sorting, the control exercise, or was it scheduling a small discomfort, or looking for the gift inside a setback? Pick one, just one, and for the next 7 days apply it on purpose. Watch what changes. See the subtle shifts in your days. If this way of thinking, this old toolkit for modern life, was useful, you can subscribe. The channel is about that, turning philosophy into steps for a calmer, more focused life, and we'd like to hear from you. In the comments, you can say which principle you're going with. Or tell a story about how you've already started using this. What you share builds a community where we can all learn from each other's path. Thanks for watching. And remember, your peace isn't about avoiding the storm. It's about finding your footing while you're in it.